I have been invited to come to Wat Jetawan in order to give a talk on the Dhamma, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity because it is always a joy to meet interested Buddhist people, and of course this evening it's especially pleasant being in this lovely Uposatha hall. The conditions are very conducive. They are conducive to a peaceful heart, a peaceful mind. And the Buddha said that peace was the highest happiness. And I think that all of us would like to be happy. All of us would like to be peaceful. But the problem is that most of the time we're not very peaceful. And we're not even very happy. For many of us, life seems to be a burden. Of course, there are happy times, but there seems to be so much to worry about, so much to be confused by, so much tension, so much responsibility, that many of us feel quite unhappy for a good part of the time. This is why the Buddha said in his very first sermon that life is dukkha. There is this problem. This is a common human problem. Not only in Kuala Lumpur, not only in Malaysia, everywhere, all over the world. Everywhere it's the same. Even though the conditions, the external conditions, may change considerably, even though some people are rich and some people are poor, still, wherever one goes, whomever one meets, one will find the same common experience. The mind of most people is not peaceful, and it's not really happy. Now, when human beings notice this problem, and they do notice this problem, they try to solve the problem, and they try to solve it in different ways. The most obvious way to solve the problem that we all try to do is to try and control the external, try to have more material security, prosperity, so that we will have more and more comfort. Thinking that when we have more and more comfort, more and more security, more and more possessions, we will not have this problem. Our hearts will become peaceful and happy. And so everyone, everywhere, is trying very hard to get more and more and more. But when we look more closely, we see that even people who have a lot, that is, quite wealthy people, highly educated, quite well-to-do, influential, even powerful people, they still have the same problem. Their minds are not any more peaceful and not any more happy. And from my observation, I actually think that the well-off people and the wealthy people are less happy, less peaceful. Now I know this is a generalization, and I'm sure there are many exceptions to this, but generalizations are important as well. From my observation, poor people, yes, they are poor. They have very little. They're struggling. Some people are struggling to just have enough to eat, struggling to get enough just to survive. Yes, that's very hard life. That's a very hard life. But those people have fewer mental problems than people living in a city, well-to-do, plenty to eat, house to live in, nice clothes. These people seem to have more emotional, psychological, mental suffering than the poor person just struggling for survival. Because the poor person struggling for survival hasn't got time to worry so much about life, to worry whether they're beautiful enough, young enough, handsome enough, whether they're going to be successful enough. They're just concerned with survival. They're not worried about all those things. So they just go on struggling for survival. They suffer, but their suffering is not as much, I think, sometimes. It's more physical suffering. But then we see in well-to-do communities, amongst well-to-do people, both here in KL and certainly in Australia, well-to-do people who are, one could say, that they're not lacking. They're not struggling for survival, they don't have to worry for survival. So they start worrying about something else. Worry about what they look like, worry about where they want to go for a holiday, worrying about whether they can have a new car, just worrying about anything. And they suffer a lot. So then people see this and they still want to find a way out of suffering. And people try all sorts of things. And people drink alcohol. Why do they drink alcohol? If someone is really happy, why would they drink alcohol? They drink alcohol and get drunk because you're not really happy. Then you want to get away from yourself. You're tired of yourself, fed up. Fed up with your suffering. So you want to just get drunk. Or you take drugs. Why? To get away from this suffering, from this state that you're not peaceful, you're not happy. Or you're looking for something more exciting, more happy. So you get away, you want to get away. Drugs, alcohol, excitement, gambling. Why do people gamble? Because they want to get away from the boredom, from the unhappiness, from the misery, from the pointless existence that they have. So people try various things in order to resolve the problem of unhappiness or lack of peace. However, whatever we try, it may relieve the situation, but it doesn't solve it, because the seeds of the problem are within our own hearts. And actually some of the ways that people try only compound the problem, only make the problem even more burdensome, even more unbearable. This you can see in your own lives and in the lives of other people. Then some of us eventually, from our experience, our observation, or our good fortune of having met somebody who mentions and points to the teachings of the Buddha, begin to think that there may be a different approach, a different way to happiness and peace. And in actual fact, I think that material prosperity, material growth and prosperity is in a way very good. because it makes you fully aware of the fact that you will not become happy and peaceful just by having more and more and more. When you're very poor and struggling for survival, yes, you still have the hope. If only I can get that motorbike, then I'll be happy. If only I can have a motor car, then I'll be happy. So you've got a hope. There's hope for you, and you live with this hope. So the village people, the very poor people, there's still a lot of hope for happiness from material. At least there's a hope. Maybe, if only I can get that, if only I can have a bit more, then I'll be happy. But once you've got more, once you have the opportunity to get more and more, and you're still not happy, then you start doubting. Maybe this is not the way to happiness. And this is why I think that in developed countries, or materially prosperous countries, and from my observation in Kuala Lumpur, it's quite a prosperous city. But certainly where I've been living for the last 9 years, in Australia, which is quite a prosperous country, and people live quite comfortably. It's a very easy life, not much struggle for survival. You don't have to struggle, everything is given. You don't have to work, you'll be supported in Australia. It's very comfortable. Now, from my observation, I think that this is, in a way, very, let's say, very helpful for the spiritual life. Many people think that prosperity, material growth, is a hindrance to the spiritual life. They say, where there is where there is the material growth and prosperity, spiritual life is not possible. I disagree. And I disagree because when people do already have the possibility of following greed, following ambition, acquiring more and more, in the end they will see that's not the way. Because in the end you have so much and you're still not so happy, not so peaceful. If anything, as I said, you're less happy, less peaceful, because you've got even more to worry about. The more you have to protect, the more you have to worry about. So for people in say in a developed, prosperous situation, I think it's very easy for them to start turning away from that material approach. It's not that you're going to throw away your material possessions, but you start thinking there must be something else in life. There must be something that will bring this peace and happiness that I want. My car is not doing it, my house is not doing it, the money in the bank, well, it's nice, but still it's not giving it to me. So then what's left? Well, some people keep on trying more and more things, but a lot of people start thinking, well, maybe it is the heart, maybe it is the mind that I have to look at. Maybe I have to find this peace and this happiness within my heart, within my mind. Maybe I have to change internally. Maybe I have to find a treasure within, a refuge within, rather than from out there. And that's when we become interested in spiritual matters, in religion. In particular, the Buddhist teaching, which is pointing to the mind and the heart, saying that this is the source, this is the cause for either happiness or unhappiness. And if we want happiness, we must come within and develop it in our own hearts and minds. So that I feel in our quest for happiness, in our quest for peace, most of us have tried many different ways. And in the end, we must come back home. You go searching around all over the place, but in the end you've got to come back home. You've got to come back to the source. And the source of life is your heart, your mind. Whatever you have, it doesn't matter how much you have. If your heart, if your mind is not peaceful, nothing can make you peaceful. A good example of this is related in the scriptures. It's something, an occasion in the time of the Buddha. As you know, the Buddha was a forest dweller. He lived in the forest. He went to the city sometimes to collect alms, to meet and teach, but he preferred to live in the forest, in the mountains, away from the crowd. And he encouraged his monks to do the same. On this occasion, the Buddha was traveling, and in those days, traveling doesn't mean you hop on an aeroplane or in an air-conditioned car. One walked, and the monks walked everywhere. The Buddha walked wherever he went. So he was traveling from one place to another, and he was walking. And in those days, of course, there were towns and cities, but there was a lot of forest, much more than we have today. So in his travel, when it comes to night time, he would sleep out in the forest. And monks still do this today in many places in Thailand. They go on these travel, pilgrimage, sleeping in the forest. So the Buddha was traveling, and as dusk came, then he set himself down and sleeping on the ground for the night. Then in the morning, the early part of the morning, he got up and he sat meditation. And as dawn passed, there came a young man along that same path, that same track or road. And he saw the Buddha sitting under the tree, and so he went to the Buddha and said, "Well, Samana is like a monk or a recluse. It really means somebody who's striving for peace. Did you have a comfortable night?" And the Buddha said, "Yes, if anyone can say that they had a happy abiding, a happy night, I had a happy night." And this young man looked with disbelief. He didn't believe. He said, "How can you have had a happy and comfortable night? The ground is very hard. The leaves on the ground are only a few. The ground is very hard. The nights are very cold." It must have been the cold season, and it can get very cold in winter. "The wind is very strong, and your robes are very thin. How is it that you had a comfortable night?" So the Buddha asked him, "Well, before I answer, I'll ask you a question. Suppose there is a king, a wealthy, rich and powerful king, and he lives in a palace. And this palace, he has his chamber, which is the bedroom, with a big bed, with nice coverings and soft pillows. And everything is fragrant, it's warm, and he's got guards to protect him and fan him if it's too hot and protect him from the mosquitoes. So he's got ideal condition. He lays down to go to sleep. But if that king's mind was overcome by greed, by lust, do you think that that king could have a peaceful and comfortable night? Or if the king's mind was overcome by anger and hatred, do you think that he could have a peaceful and happy night? Or if that king's mind was just in a state of confusion and anxiety and fear, do you think the king, in that midst of comfort, could have a comfortable night?" The young man had to concede, well, no, even on that nice comfortable bed, he would suffer. He would be in hell, either through lust and craving, or through anger and hatred, or just through confusion and worry. His mind being in that state, he couldn't have a peaceful, comfortable night. Just so, the Buddha then said, but my mind is freed from greed. No greed can assail it. My mind is freed from hatred. No hatred can it enter. My mind is freed from all ignorance. No confusion can arise. Therefore, I had a comfortable and happy mind. And this is a very important teaching because it makes it very clear to us as to where the source of happiness really is and what we have to do in order to achieve that happiness. There is a lot of Buddhist teachings and a lot of different ideas about the goal of Buddhism. And although we say Nibbana is the goal of Buddhism, there's a lot of teachings about what this Nibbana is. And a lot of it is quite abstract and can sound very high and very far away. But the best definition of Nibbana, I think the best one for us, is the one given by Venerable Sariputta when he was asked. They say Nibbana, but what is this Nibbana? And Venerable Sariputta said, Nibbana is the complete eradication, the complete cessation of greed, hatred and ignorance. Now this is in conformity with what the Buddha has just said. And it tells us very clearly what we need to do in order to achieve true peace and happiness. It gives us the direction, you see. It gives us the guiding star. That's the direction to move. So you hear many people give you many teachings, both Buddhist teachers, monks from different traditions, also non-Buddhist teachers. They may say, this is true, this is the way to go, this is the holy word, this is the holy book, this is the holy teaching, all of that. But for us, we have the direction. It doesn't matter who is teaching. It doesn't matter what book it's written in. We know whether it's the right teaching or not. If it's a teaching that is encouraging us to reduce greed, reduce hatred, reduce ignorance, that is a teaching which is in conformity with the way to peace and happiness. You can follow that teaching. It doesn't matter who's teaching it. It doesn't matter which book it's in. Whether it's a Buddhist monk or whether it's a little boy saying something, if it's to reduce greed, hatred and ignorance, that teaching is in conformity with the teaching of the Buddha. And more important, that is the teaching to peace and happiness. But if a teaching or a teacher is saying something, encouraging something, which is only increasing your greed, encouraging you to be more greedy, encouraging you to hate, encouraging you to be more gullible, that means believing without questioning, without investigation, filling your mind with all sorts of things that you cannot understand and you cannot reason, you cannot question. That teaching is something you'd better be careful of, because that is not the path to peace and happiness. So this is very important for you when you are studying, trying to find the way to peace and happiness, the guiding light. Now, how are we going to move in this direction? We know the direction. How are we going to move? And this is why the Buddha taught the path of training. The path of training, that which we call the Eightfold Path of the Buddha, which the Buddha said was the path to enlightenment, the path to peace, the path to happiness. And it's the same path for women, for men, for monks, for lay people. It's exactly the same path. There's only one. The Buddha did not teach two paths, one path. This path is designed to help us move in that direction. And we must endeavor to walk the path. The Buddha points the way, we must choose to walk. So if we understand just what I've said so far, that is already a start on the path. You have that much right view. First step on the path. The first step on the Eightfold Path is right view. Now you know, happiness cannot be achieved just by getting more. Happiness is not going to be achieved from out there. True peace, true happiness must come from in here, from your own heart, from your own mind, from cultivating the mind. So you have already right view. It's very important because most people don't know that. Most people still think that happiness is out there somewhere waiting for me to find it. Looking for the ideal person who will make me happy for the rest of my life. That's what all the young men and women are doing these days. We went for a walk at the park, and whenever I walk in the park, I see all these couples, young men looking for the ideal young woman, the young woman looking for the ideal young man, to make them happy for the rest of one's life. Of course, that may, that's all right. I certainly, it's quite all right. But nobody can make you happy. Nobody can make you perfectly happy. And then there are people looking for the ideal place to live. If I only can find the ideal place, then I'll be happy. I was a little like that when I was younger. I thought, living in Australia is really boring. I didn't like it very much, so I thought, I want to go and see the world. I want to see different places, different people, find really exciting, and so that I'll become happy. So I went traveling, looking around different places, different cultures, different societies, and I was very interested, so I'd go everywhere. If I heard there was something interesting somewhere, I'd go. Doesn't matter how far away it was. And my plan was to go right around the world, looking everywhere for everything. But after about 8 months, I realized how stupid that was, because wherever I went, there was the same old me going. And I wasn't a very happy person, so I didn't find much happiness. I'm just an ordinary person, but quite often, wherever you go, it's the same old story. In the end, you take your problems with you wherever you go. The ideal place doesn't seem to exist. As long as the mind is not ideal, you'll never find the ideal place. If your mind doesn't have happiness, you'll never find a happy place. So this view, you see, now this is right view. We're beginning to understand something. I'm not saying there is no happiness in the world. There are happy places. Certainly there are places which are nice, like this is a nice place. It's better than many other places. But never perfect. And in the end, the important thing is the heart, the mind. So this is the first aspect of the path, right view, knowing where true happiness is. The second step of the path is right aspiration. And by now you should know what right aspiration is. If your goal is really peace and happiness, well, you know what you have to do, don't you? You have to reduce greed, hatred, and ignorance. Because these are the things that disturb the mind, weaken the mind, bring unhappiness into the mind, bring misery into the world. We think they're our good friends. We think that greed is perfectly natural, that if we're not greedy, we won't be able to do anything. We think that you've got to get angry. I mean, if you don't get angry, you won't be able to do anything. We actually believe that. People tell me that. When I say, our goal is to reduce greed and hatred, they say, I think it's natural to be greedy. It's natural to be angry. It's good. You get motivated. You can do things. Yes, but what can you do? Just create more misery. That's what you do. Look at your mind. When the mind is overcome by greed, what is it like? And look at what you do. I mean, really look at what you do, how you live. You bring beauty into the world. Do you bring happiness into the world? Do you bring harmony into the world? What do you do when you're full of greed? Usually we don't bring very lovely things into the world. We bring pain, misery, hurt, and anger, hatred. Of course, this is more obvious. When you're angry and full of hatred, it's miserable. It's what hell is, isn't it? You don't have to wait. You can see what hell is like when you're angry and full of hatred. And of course, when we're angry and full of hatred, it's like a poison. We contaminate anyone who comes close to us. Every word we say, every look we give, every gesture, like poison. It hurts everybody who comes close to us. Have you noticed it? When you're really angry, just watch yourself, how you speak. Even to say yes or no, bite somebody's head off. And how impatient we can be. And just the way we look at people. See, we must be clear on that. These things are not our friends. They don't bring us happiness, and they don't bring anyone happiness. The confusion that comes from just muddled thinking, the mind that's just all lost in thoughts, the past, the present, just doubting, worrying, all full of cluttered, useless thinking. That mind is a bit of a problem as well, isn't it? A burden. So, the second factor on the Eightfold Path is right aspiration. Our aspiration, based on our right view, we know these things are the troublemakers. This is the problem. Our aspiration is to somehow try to reduce, control and reduce and eventually eliminate these things that cause trouble in our hearts. So that's right view, right aspiration. The rest of the path is very simple. Once you have right view, right aspiration, you should know what to do. All you have to do now is get on with it. But the rest of the path is very simple. See, once you have right view and right aspiration, you will know how to live your life. So we live our lives to try and contain greed and hatred. We don't give vent. We don't follow. We don't encourage too much. We start putting a check on these things because we know they are the actual troublemaker. They are the actual problem. So we start controlling, putting a check. And this is why we have things like moral rules, like right speech and right action, right livelihood. It's starting to put a check, a control, a limit, a boundary around us so that we don't develop more greed, hatred, more hatred. We start developing some restraint on our greed. As we're training ourselves, you see, we think the mind can be trained. You can train it both ways. If you follow greed, greed becomes stronger. If you just follow anger and become just encourage yourself to become more and more angry, you just become a more angry person, don't you? You can train yourself as you want. You can train yourself to be more greedy and more angry, or you can train yourself to be less greedy and less angry. And our aspiration is to go the opposite. So moral precepts are just the first step in training. We're beginning to train ourselves, keep ourselves within a boundary. We say, I'm going to train myself not to kill. Because to kill is based on greed or hatred. I'm going to train myself not to steal. Because stealing is based on greed and hatred. I don't think you can steal unless you're greedy or have some sort of hatred. These things, these actions are dependent on these foul states of mind. If you're a layperson, I train myself to live within the family life. In other words, not committing adultery. This is very important, because this, again, is, as I say, it's a check on desire, on greed, on craving, because greed never knows enough. Greed can never be satisfied. Desire can never be satisfied. Try it. See if you can. You've been trying how many years now? Own up. How many years have you been trying? And this is not the first time round. You've been doing this for many, many, many lifetimes. It's not the first time. You've been trying this way for so long. But from my experience, I can honestly say that following greed only strengthens greed. Following desire only makes desire stronger. Desire is a very tricky thing. Desire is never faithful to its object. As soon as it gets it, it wants something else. Have you noticed? I noticed this as a monk very much. As a monk, you see, you live a very disciplined life, a life of austerity. So you really notice desire very, very easily, because you don't have quite as much scope to indulge. So desire becomes very, very clear, very obvious. So when I was living in Thailand, the first few years, I had a lot of difficulty. And because as a monk you can't, there are not many things you're allowed. We don't watch television, no radios, no singing, no dancing, and you're a celibate life, and hardly any reading, but you're allowed to eat. So all your desire goes towards food. Food becomes the big thing in your life. There's only one thing bigger than food, and that is to get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the afternoon if you can. This is in the forest monasteries in Thailand. Now Ajahn Chah's monastery are very, very austere, or they used to be. I think they've become a little less austere, but very austere. So we only have one meal a day, and we only have the one meal. So you go on alms round in early morning, come back and you eat. And the food is very simple. It's just very simple food, poor part of Thailand. The rest of the day is usually nothing, just water. But occasionally, maybe every now and again, there'd be a sweet drink, either a tea or something sweet. The important thing was that it was sweet. So you have a tremendous amount of craving. And I used to think, well, surely, this is 20th century. Surely we could have a cup of tea at least every second day or something, or even twice a week. And you start really craving. If I only had a cup of tea every 2 or 3 days, I'd be so happy. Really, that's for your goal in life. So then, a few years later, the Wat Nanachan was established. And this branch monastery was established for training Western monks. So all of us were the Western disciples of Ajahn Chah. So we could we could set up the monastery a little bit differently. So we decided we'd have a cup of tea every second day. At 5 p.m. every second day the bell would go and we'd all go and have a cup of tea. Just black tea with sugar. Sometimes it was coffee. So that was very nice. I thought, this is really good. This is civilized. I was really happy for a little while. And then I started to think, hey, every second day we should have a cup of tea every day. Every second day. And then we have 2 cups, you see. On each second day we have 2 cups of tea. So maybe if we just have 1 cup of tea every day, that would be better. So eventually I became the abbot, so we had a cup of tea every day. And I was happy for a little while, see? But then it becomes the normal, isn't it? You have your cup of tea every day and then it's just ordinary. You don't appreciate it anymore. You're not happy anymore. So you start thinking, what else can we have? It would be nice to have some, because there are some things that monks are allowed to have, like sugar. And in Thailand they've got different types of sugar, like palm sugar cakes. And make cakes from palm sugar, little blocks of sugar. Or black chocolate, which is only sugar and cocoa, that's allowable for monks. So you start thinking, it'd be really nice to have some of these sugar cakes. Then I'd be happy. And then, you can't avoid but see what's going on there. You see that's the mind that desire never knows enough. And I can see that happen. It doesn't matter what you do, you come to the same point. You're still not contented. So you want something else. Following desire does not bring you contentment. It brings you momentary gratification, but then you still want more. So following desire is not the way to contentment. This you can see in your life. When we see this, then we will also know the importance of having some boundaries, limitations, where we can develop the mind in a different way. Because following desire not only strengthens desire, but it also weakens the mind. It weakens your spiritual faculties. The mind becomes weaker, less able to make choice, less able to be responsible. The mind just sinks and slides. So now, the importance of the moral precepts is to put ourselves within certain limits so as to train ourselves, so as to develop a life which is compatible with Dhamma, a life which is compatible with our goal of peace and happiness, so that we're not living in a way which brings more problems. That's all that morality is, just training ourselves to live a life which brings self-esteem, self-respect, which brings a little more inner peace, inner harmony, outer harmony. So that's the next part of the training, right speech, right action, right livelihood. It's just living in a way which is responsible and compatible with our goal. Then the next part of the path is very, very important. Now we get to the heart of the training, which is to do with the mind itself. Because this is the source, and this is where we must come and do the real work. And this we call, or the Buddha called, Citta Bhavana, cultivation of the mind. And what we cultivate is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is a way of developing the mind. Developing it so it becomes more clear, more precise, more fit to be a tool to understand ourselves, to shape ourselves, to shape life, to liberate ourselves. If the mind isn't trained, it cannot really do very much, because all of us are very much animals of habit. We are all very much controlled by our habits and our conditioning. And that's why it's so hard to change, you see. You know to get angry is wrong, but you can't stop. What can you do? When you're angry, you're angry. You may know that to worry is not good suffering, but what can you do? The mind just keeps on worrying and worrying and worrying. You know that jealousy is a failing and it's miserable, but you can't stop. And when the mind can't stop, then how can the body usually can't stop either? Once we can't stop our anger, then we speak. Once we can't stop our greed, then maybe we steal. Once we can't stop our lust, maybe we break our commitment to our partner. Once we cannot control the mind, then it's very hard to really do much about the defilement. So this is the aspect of training the mind in meditation. Buddhist meditation is simply making effort to develop greater mindfulness and greater concentration. Mindfulness is the wakeful quality of the mind. You are awake, and you know that you're awake. You're no longer asleep. But most people are asleep, most of the time. People who are sleeping walk around, drive cars, talk, work, but they're still asleep. Mindfulness is the wakeful quality of the mind. You are awake, and you know that you're awake. You're no longer asleep. But most people are asleep, most of the time. People who are sleeping walk around, drive cars, talk, work, but they're still asleep. Not asleep in the sense of with their eyes closed and snoring, although that happens too sometimes, but asleep in that the mind is not clear. There is no wakefulness. The mind is just on automatic, mechanical. So we just react habitually. Very little awareness. Very little choice is possible. When I became a Buddhist monk, I was given the name Jagaro. In Pali, Jagara. Jagara, the root in Pali, Jaga, means wake, to be awake. One who's awake from the sleep of defilements. I'm still trying to live up to that. But that is what all of us have to become. Awake. Mindfulness, sati, is this quality of wakefulness that we try to develop in our lives. Not only in the meditation, but wherever you are. Try to know what you are doing. Just wake up. You wake up in the morning, but don't only wake up once. Keep waking up. What are you doing? What are you doing? What is happening? What are you experiencing? What is the intention? What are you doing? What are you feeling? What's happening within you? Know yourself. Be aware of yourself. Sati is a quality of mind that may be present, but we need to bring it up. It does not stop us from doing things or from being efficient. If anything, it helps us become more efficient. We can do what we are doing with greater precision, more efficiency. We make fewer mistakes, fewer accidents. There's so much more sensitivity because we are awake, we feel, we see. We're sensitive to the things around us. We're sensitive to how we are relating. We are sensitive to the results that come about. So we learn a lot. We learn from life. We learn from experience. We can shape, because when we are mindful, we can choose. How will I respond? Somebody say something nasty to me, but I'm awake. Oh, I feel when they say something nasty, and I feel the aversion, but I'm awake, and I know this, and I can choose either to get angry, or I can say, never mind. So this wakefulness, this sati, is something to be developed, tried, not only in meditation. Being mindful doesn't mean doing something in a very strange way, only when you come to the temple, doing slow walking or something. Mindfulness is just the mind that is awake, the mind fully present. The mind present, the mind here, now, knowing what are you doing, what are you feeling, what is happening within you now. This quality can be present and you can develop it. If you develop this quality, many doorways will open to you. And one of the doorways is that you will be able to develop concentration. You cannot develop concentration without developing mindfulness. But concentration does require a systematic training in formal meditation. Yes, that requires a special activity. You'll just have to make time to come and sit down and quiet the mind and calm the mind and concentrate the mind. So that is a special training, but it's an important training because that will give your mind power. That's where you get your power from. The power to control the mind, the power to direct the mind. But mindfulness is far more important for lay people like yourselves. It's important for everyone, but for lay people especially, because you don't have so much time to do formal meditation, and you don't have such quiet places. But you can still be mindful. You can develop mindfulness. You can develop mindfulness in everyday life. Just wake up and stay awake. And every time you fall asleep, try to wake up again. There was a little novice. I don't think this is a true story. I just heard it from someone. Novices have a very hard life, much harder than the monks. Because the novices have to look after the teacher. They have to get up early and be there when the teacher gets up, and they have to stay up later, wait till the teacher goes to bed, and they have to wash the teacher's robes and wash his bowl, and it's a tough life being a novice. So this little novice, he was always tired, always sleepy. He just wanted to sleep, because he'd have to get up, in the forest monasteries they get up at 3 a.m, so the novice had to get up at 2:30, and he'd have to do all this work. Always tired and sleepy. All he wanted to do was sleep. And he was craving. And all I want to do is just go to sleep. So then, unfortunately, this novice got sick. Got some strange sickness. Maybe it was malaria to the brain or something. And he died. And his last wish, of course, was to just go to sleep. So this little novice was reborn as a slug. You know what a slug is? One of these, but not an ordinary slug. This is a slug in the bottom of the ocean, right in the bottom of the ocean where it's dark. And this slug is just laying there, right at the bottom of the ocean, and just sleeping. And once in every 100 years, it opens its eyes, just for a moment, and then goes back to sleep. So this is the predicament, you see. I mean, our mindfulness is very weak. We wake up, and then we fall asleep again for a long time, and then we wake up again. Usually only when suffering. When there's suffering, then we wake up. Otherwise we sleep long and But, of course, it need not be like this. We can, through intentional effort, not a lot of effort, just through intentional, just gentle effort, bring wakefulness into our life. What are you doing? What are you feeling? What is happening within you? What are you doing? What are you feeling? What is happening within you? Know yourself, know your mind, know your feelings, know what you're doing. Nothing special, just know. With this knowing, many doors will open to you. Many doorways to changing your life, changing your attitudes, changing the way you relate, and most important, the way to peace becomes clearer and clearer. So this is the way of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path. If we develop it, peace and happiness will result. Because as we develop it, our lives become more peaceful, our minds become more peaceful, and within that peace, there can be wisdom arising. So this is not meant to be a comprehensive. I'm not trying to give you everything in a nutshell so that you don't need to know anything else. It's just an overall picture. The purpose of the talk really is just to try and inspire you, encourage you to follow it up. Follow it up. Look into it. It's very necessary. You really have no choice. What else can you do? When we want peace and happiness, then we must look into this. So I offer this reflection and these teachings for you to contemplate. And if you find them useful, then please apply them in your lives. And I think that's sufficient for this evening. And now I would like to give you the opportunity to ask questions. If there are questions, either in regards to what I have said, or in regards to what I have neglected to say, and please feel quite free to ask anything about the teaching. I don't guarantee that I can answer it, but you can ask. So please do. I've had a controversial topic, especially these days, and there are many different views and opinions about it, but I can say one thing, is that no one who is alive is free from blame. No one has hands that are perfectly clean. See, just by being alive, you are contributing to death. You cannot escape that fact. Just living in this city, you are part of what happens in this city. You are just indirectly, you're always part of whatever happens. You're part of the system. You're part of the whole. So you are part of it. Indirectly, you have some contribution. You have the contribution. Somehow you have a small contribution to what's happening in the Middle East. Yes, you have a contribution. Indirectly, you can see there will be a contribution. But the question is how direct and how indirect. This is a matter of degree. See, just for having this temple here, there has to be a lot of destruction. Not only clearing the site, I mean, you've got a lot of stuff here, building materials, a lot of, it depends. To get here, you have to drive your cars. To drive the cars, you have to have petrol and oil, roads and electricity and so much. It's all related. Everything is interrelated. So whatever happens in this system of which we are part, then we have some contribution in it. That's the very first thing. So, say you eat vegetarian, does that mean you are free from blame? No, of course not. For a start, and just to eat vegetables is still requires some killing. There is killing of animals in order to be able to have nice fruit and nice vegetables. The insecticides, the pesticides, the ploughing, the clearing of fields, and then transporting you've still got all the infrastructure, which is the same. Okay. Now, don't jump to a conclusion. I'm not justifying eating meat as yet. I'm just pointing out, reflecting with you the situation. So, when we eat meat, you cannot deny that you are indirectly supporting the killing of animals. That's fact. You buy the meat. That means that you're consuming it, you're buying it. somebody has to kill the animal to supply it. So you are related in that cycle. It's a little bit closer. You're a little bit closer to it than somebody who eats vegetarian. They're still involved, but not so close. It's still part of the same system though. Now, what is the Buddha's position on this? Well, the Buddha, from what we gather, as you know, there are different schools of Buddhism. They all have their books. They don't always agree. Who knows? Even if I was there at the time of the Buddha, I can't remember, so I don't really know. But I'm a Theravada monk, so I look at the Theravada scriptures. In the Theravada scriptures, which are, I think, the most authentic, and it's quite clear that the Buddha certainly did not make a rule on vegetarianism. He did not lay down as a rule, either for monks or for lay people. So I don't think that personally, I don't think there is any doubt about that. The Buddha did not lay down a rule with regards to vegetarianism. And I feel, having lived a bhikkhu life long enough, I feel that I feel sure of that. Because if you understand the bhikkhu life, what is important in the bhikkhu life, you would see why the Buddha would not lay down a rule like that. But coming back to the question, so the Buddha did not lay down a rule. So what rule did he lay down? Well, he laid down the first basic standard. His cutting off point was, do not kill. Train yourself not to kill. That's just a basic, you see. That's not the end of the path. And it's just a basic. The Buddha's morality, rules of training, are meant for ordinary people. They're not meant for arahants. See, these 5 precepts, or the monk's vinaya, is not meant for arahants. Arahants wouldn't need these. These precepts are meant for ordinary human beings, just ordinary people. Not people who've been meditating for years and years, just ordinary Joe Blow. Ordinary Miss Wong. Or John Smith, or whatever. They're just ordinary people. So, now if it is meant for if the moral precepts are meant for ordinary people, then it is important that an ordinary person must be able to keep it. Otherwise, what's the point of having a rule? See, if you make a rule and I'm going to make a rule for you, and I know you can't keep it, well, that's really stupid, isn't it? Why make that rule? Okay, now I want you to promise that you will never have an angry thought in your mind. And so I make you promise, but I know you can't do it. No ordinary person can do it. So to make a commandment or a rule like that is stupid. Because you're just setting up frustration, guilt. Impossible. Morality must be something that can be lived. So we make the moral precepts at a standard which is for ordinary people. So we start off, the Buddha just started off, don't kill. And he didn't make it a commandment, he said, train yourself not to kill. Now that's something it's still hard to do, you know. If you take people in this world, if they could keep that one rule, the world would be very different than it is now. It's a very hard rule to keep, just not to kill. So you take that, that's this foundation, you try not to kill any living creature. Just start there, it's not the end, it's just the start. That's the beginning, first step. And it's already a very good step. And you see the 5 precepts, it's possible for a human being to keep them. Don't commit adultery, for instance. There's a big difference between that and thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife. For an ordinary person, that commandment is impossible to keep because they don't have control over their mind. And desire comes into the mind. It just comes because it's a habit. You have instincts. There's a habit comes, lust. So you've broken your precept, your commandment. So every Christian who walks around breaks that commandment. Who knows how many times a day or how many times a week. Not that they do anything bad, it's just that the mind will have such thoughts. But in Buddhism, morality is seen to be something pragmatic, practical. You must be able to live it. So we say, don't commit adultery. It's a physical thing, so you keep it at that level. The same with stealing. It doesn't mean you may want somebody's car, but don't steal it. Okay? So, dear me, I hope I haven't damaged this beautiful sea. So, morality is just the beginning, and it's a practical level for ordinary people. And ordinary people must be able to live it, otherwise we don't make it the standard. So the Buddha started don't kill. It's just at that level. Now, that's already, if you can live that, that's very good. Now, beyond that, is there anything more? Well, yes, of course. There's the rest of the training we've been talking about. And yes, it is possible that as you become more aware, and as you contemplate that what you do has many effects, many consequences, you may begin to choose and shape your lifestyle to make it, let's say, less and less destructive. Less and less destructive. Which basically means being more easily satisfied, being more contented, knowing how much you need. It's very important. No, we're not just talking about me, we're talking about everything. Knowing how much you need, knowing how much to use, what is appropriate. So you may just begin to, you know that to be very wasteful, to indulge and use a lot of things, even though you can, you may not want to because you don't, it's wasteful. And you know that that increases the destruction in the world. Now this is very important today because we can see in this world is limited. It's a limited world. Our desire is unlimited. Something's got to give there, otherwise there's going to be trouble. We just have to learn to restrain ourselves. We just not just consume more and more and more. The consumer society is the destructive society. We must learn to reduce. So it is possible that the individual Buddhas, having understood this, and as compassion grows, may choose, I don't want to eat meat. Because if I eat meat, that puts me quite close to the chain of causation that leads to killing. That's above morality. It's nothing to do with morality, it's above that. It comes from understanding, it comes from sensitivity, it should come from compassion. That's the only reason, really, for a Buddhist to stop eating meat should be compassion. That one just feels for other creatures, and one doesn't want to be so close to that activity as killing. So one removes oneself a bit further still. Just go a bit further away from it. You're still involved though, because you're still in the system. So you're still involved, but a bit further away. So that this teaching, or this thing to do with vegetarianism, from the Buddhist perspective, the way I understand it, is that it is not a matter of morality. The Buddhist morality is very clear. Don't kill. That's morality. But it is something to do with more than just morality. It's to do with the individual's choice as to how much one is willing to give up, how much one is willing to renounce, in order to reduce the amount of destruction, including the amount of killing in this world, which is the process of nekamma, renunciation, simplification, and it's also the development of compassion in the human being. And if a human being does it, I think it's very good. praiseworthy. I think it should be that person should be respected. And I think it's good if they do it for these reasons. If somebody chooses to be vegetarian for these reasons, I think good. I respect them. But understand that it's not morality. Furthermore, worse than eating meat is the person who becomes a vegetarian and then starts hating all the meat eaters and starts criticizing them and abusing them and being such harsh. That mind is so unskillful. I think it's much more unskillful than the person who just... most people who eat meat, they don't eat meat because they want to kill animals. It's just habit. When they eat meat, they don't say, I'm going to eat more steak so they'll kill more cattle. Or, I'm going to eat more chicken so they'll kill more chickens. I mean, how many people do that? No one does that. You don't think, I'm going to eat this chicken so that they'll kill another chicken. You just eat the chicken because it's food. I mean, you don't want them to kill it, but you still eat it because it's just a habit. It's your culture, or that's what you've been taught to eat. That's what you've been taught to cook. Most people don't even know what else to eat. But the person who, if you're vegetarian and then you intentionally start criticizing and blaming, and they develop a lot of hatred, aversion. Now that's very wrong. So we should I respect people who are vegetarian. I think it's marvelous, but they develop it from compassion and have compassion for everyone, even for the meat eaters. So this is my perspective on vegetarianism. I think it's very good. But it's not to do with morality, it's to do with the personal choice towards wanting to reduce the contribution to destruction and killing out of compassion, out of sensitivity. As for Buddhist monks, yes, if they do that, I still respect them. I think it's very good. I think it is good to be vegetarian. But I'm not a strict vegetarian. Because for me still, I find it difficult. Why I find it difficult? Because it's so hard to, when people want to give, it's so hard for me to say no. Because still my feeling is that the main training for a monk is to be one who is contented. The one who is contented. So that you take what you're given. You don't ask. You don't choose. You take what you're given. I mean, I do. So I do, during the range retreat I eat vegetarian and I encourage it. But I find it very difficult. If I'm eating vegetarian, I only do it when there's other monks who are not vegetarian. So that when people come with non-vegetarian food, there'll be somebody to take the food. But it's very hard. You're sitting there and these people come with their food that they've prepared with love and want to give it to you. And if you refuse it, it's a very hard thing to do, actually. Or you look at it, and the worst thing is to start looking at it and smelling it, and what's in here? That's the worst. I think that's really awful when monks do that. I think monks should just, the Buddha said what monks should do. You look in your bowl, and you walk on arms around. When you walk on arms around, you don't choose, which is a rich house. You just walk. And when people are putting food in your bowl, you don't look first and see what they're going to give you. You look in your bowl, and you take what they give you with gratitude. That's all. You don't start wondering, what is this? What's in here? So, from the monk's training point of view, the main emphasis is on contentment. Contentment is so crucial to the monk's training that I can see why the Buddha would not make vegetarianism a rule. But then, if a monk wants to be vegetarian, he can still be contented, and that's fine. But I'm just saying, it's something that the individual will choose to do, and the choice should be from compassion and understanding. So when people accuse me of being like that, because if they say, are you vegetarian? Well, I say, well, I'm 90% vegetarian. Because mainly we are vegetarian, but sometimes people bring, I take. And they say, you're guilty. I say, yes, I give up. Yes, but so is everyone else. Any other question? Yes, well, you can see that this is what happens. Is it a good idea, a good intention, but lacking in wisdom is actually the cause of a lot of suffering. There's a good intention but no wisdom. This is a good intention but no right understanding, no right view. And there's many of these sort of things in our religion, in Buddhism. So yes, I mean, you see, of course, the idea is good, to release trapped animals, to release animals from suffering. That's a very good thing to do. But then, if you make it into a ritual where people are encouraged to do that, and then it becomes a trade. So people go to catch animals on purpose, they catch them. Those animals would be free if there was no trade, but they have to go and catch them, to bring them in cages, starve them, maltreat them, and so that people can come buy them and release them. And as you say, when they're released, quite often they're in such poor shape, they end up dying and they're not in their natural habitat. Or even worse, if they're birds, they're usually trained to come back to the merchant, or they take these fish and release them in water which is not suitable for them, or tortoises are released in places which, maybe some of them are land turtle, but they release them in water and they drown, or because some of them, not all of them, live in water. So that you can see just the intention is sort of good, or the idea is sort of good, but no wisdom at all, and it leads to just misery and suffering. This, I think, needs to be eliminated from our practice, myself. If people want to really release animals, yes, if you come across an animal that's injured, yes, by all means, take it in. Or a stray cat that has nowhere to live, take it in and feed it, if you want to really care for an animal. Or if you want to really, like we were saying, you really feel for animals, you want to release them, don't eat any meat, or do vegetarian for a month. That's a better thing to do than to go and buy these animals to release them. So I would like to see that practice actually stop and find another outlet for that way of that compassion, another way, rather than this superstition, or it's not it's just short-sighted. Because it happens in Australia as well. See, some people are told that they must release. You've got to release so many birds, and the only birds you can buy in Australia are budgerigars and these little birds, and you release them, they just die. They don't know how to live in it. They're just little pets. You release them, they just die. And so, or they release goldfish. They take the goldfish. What's a goldfish going to do in a river? It's ridiculous. But you see that a lot of it is done. The intention may be good. Sometimes it's out of fear because they're told to do it. So one lady came to see me, and she said that when she was in her early 20s, she'd been very sick. And she went to see a fortune teller in Thailand, and he told her what to do. She had to do all these things and release so many animals, and she did that. And apparently she got better. But I'm not sure if that was the reason. But anyway, she got better. But the fortune teller also told her that when she was 30, when she was 30, she had to release all these animals again, and a whole list of them. So she eventually married an Australian and went to live in Australia, in Perth, and she came to see me when she was getting close to 30. She told me about this, and she was really frightened, because she was really frightened, and unless she did it, she was going to get very sick again. And I said, I don't think so, it's just, I don't believe it. But I could see that it's no good. The person really feels it and is afraid. Once you've been told, if you believe it, then you just can't stop yourself. You don't have enough samadhi. The mind just goes and thinks. You can't stop yourself, you see. So that's beyond what an ordinary person, you just can't stop. So I said, well, that's nothing. If you really go ahead. But there's nothing, where are we going to find all these animals? So in the end, I said, well, why don't you write to your family and tell them to release them in Thailand, because you can do it in Bangkok very easily. Tell them to do it in your name and do it as a ceremony. And so I said, yes, go ahead, because I could see otherwise it would make her she would make herself sick. She would worry so much, she'd definitely become sick. So that you can see how this has become sometimes a matter of fear. Once you've been told, you're really afraid. So I think if we could cut this out of... there are other ways for a human being to make merit, skillful ways. It's a matter of what is a good way to make merit. What is a good way to do good actions? There are many ways. And the merit must also be associated with wisdom. It's no good doing so-called merit that just makes for problems and suffering. It's just pointless. Merit must be associated with wisdom. Your intention may be good, but you must also have wisdom. Otherwise, the results are not so sure. So with regards to chanting, I think it's up to the group, the monastery, or the group to decide on the type of chanting. And there's no reason why it has to be only one way. I think it would be a shame to lose Pali as the international Theravada language. But on the other hand, I can see definite advantage in having some translated chanting, and maybe a combination of both would be probably the ideal. So that we're experimenting with translated chanting, because in Thailand, in our monasteries, they do chant Pali Thai. They do one line Pali, one line Thai, everything that they chant. And it's quite good. So in Australia, we're experimenting, and I think it's quite good. In the end, the important thing is that we do it all one. If you're living together, then you do it the same way. You agree which way is going to be done in this monastery, and then you do it that way. I think it would be good to do a little English chanting, maybe do the Pali, and then have one chant that you can learn in English, or some things that you can learn in English. Maybe it would be good to do the paying of homage, taking of precepts, all of this in Pali. But maybe some of the chants could be in English, if people want to. Some of the maybe spreading of loving kindness, or something like that, it's maybe good to do it in English. But you can see anyway that there's different ways of looking at it. And there's relative advantages and disadvantages, and it's up to the group or the community to decide. We do translated chanting as well as Pali chanting. Personally, having tried both, I usually prefer to chant just Pali because it's just nice. I like chanting Pali. Even if I can't understand it, it doesn't matter. I like chanting. It sounds better. It's very tranquilizing. But then when we chant in translated chanting, people who are coming new find it easier because they can understand what we're saying, so they like that. So I guess it depends on if you already know the chant or if you don't. This lady put up her hand first. Well, it may well do. It may well do if how much. See, the other thing, of course, is how much is necessary. Yes, from the Buddhist point of view, it would certainly be very difficult you're a Buddhist trying to keep those precepts, and you're a doctor or a researcher and you're involved in dissecting and animals, it'd obviously be a compromise. You'd be compromising your precept. At this point, then, you'd have to decide. You'd have to decide, now, is this really necessary? You really have to question yourself, rather than just taking for granted, oh, it's just a little mice, so what, chop? You don't even think of it. But if you're a Buddhist, you'd really question it, is this really necessary for science? Is this really important? Or are other ways of doing it? Is there another way of doing it? And then maybe you'd have to decide. Well, if it is really important, and it's so crucial that you think there's greater benefit to be derived from it, well, then you may have to take that choice and take full responsibility for your action, but you know that you're killing. So, and the other thing is, you wouldn't be doing it, in such a casual or out of cruelty, or you'd probably try to find the most sort of compassionate way, and also you wouldn't do it so easily, so you'd be very considerate. See what I'm getting at? Even if that were to happen, if you really thought it was necessary for the benefit of so many others, maybe you would do it, but you would do it in a very different way. And this happens in more ordinary situations. People say, well, I have ants in my house. What do you expect me to do? You want me to let the ants take over the house? I have to sweep them out. When I sweep them, some of them get killed. Well, yes, these things happen in life. So what do? Do you let the ants take over? Well, probably you can't. You just can't do that. So you do have to maybe next time try to keep the house a bit cleaner so that you don't have ants come in. And if they do come in, then at least you'd be a bit more sensitive, a bit more careful when you're sweeping them out. It's just a different attitude. You're trying to avoid killing, but you may still kill. But you take full responsibility too. You accept, well, yes, I'm killing. Or if you have intestinal worms, or ticks. In a monastery you have lots of ticks, kangaroo ticks. What are you going to do? Tick, they're very painful. You pull it off, sometimes the head comes off, they die. But it's just the attitude that you have, is you're sensitive, you're not doing these things foolishly or out of anger and hatred. You're considering very carefully, and you're making a choice. You're trying to avoid, and then you take full responsibility. Now, in the field of science, there may have been certain advances made possible through experimentation on animals. That's benefited a lot of people. But there's been a lot of killing, mutilation, destruction of animals in the cruelest way, that's not really necessary. Not like all these tests they do on animals for cosmetics. And that's going too far. And there was that case, with this heart transplant, this big deal, they really will spend millions of dollars to try and extend somebody's life just for a few days or a few years, when they could be saving so many other children who are starving and could be quite healthy. But anyway, even with heart transplant, even if you want to do that, what's the most ridiculous thing? That they kill some sort of chimpanzee to get the heart to stick in somebody's chest. You don't need to be a brilliant medical scientist to know that that's that's not going to work. That's not going to become the way to do heart transplant. It's just a stupid. But then one doesn't, what's a chimpanzee? He's got no rights. So that would be, a Buddhist would probably consider very carefully. You wouldn't do that because, it's not really the line of research that's important. This is foolish. You concentrate on a different, maybe human transplant, or some mechanical transplant of some sort. So you just look at it slightly differently. You'd certainly be a lot more careful when you take the precept of not killing, you'd be a lot more careful. You may still have to have compromises in life, though. Most of us do, even as a monk. Still have compromises. Well, again, life is never black and white. You know, life is not black and white. There's many shades where the precept is a guiding, is a principle that the individual must then apply. And you must use wisdom and know your intention. Intention must be always skillful, and wisdom must be present. But maybe you can... What is the time? I think maybe we'll say that is enough for tonight, and so that I won't be torturing those who want to leave. So maybe we can finish the formal meeting, and I will stay a little bit longer if people want to come and just ask further questions, but just so that those people who have to leave can leave. And maybe the best way to finish the meeting, is there any announcements to make, or you can just pay homage to the Buddha together?